Welcome to the Empowering Choices Parenting Podcast. My name is Joshua.
I'm Erik.
I am Lucas.
Erik and Lucas are licensed professional counselors. We have created an online community with a website and an app full of parenting resources and courses. Most importantly, all of this is centered around a private community where you can share your struggles with us and others. If you are interested in joining, please check out our website at empoweringchoices.community or search for our app in the App Store by searching Empowering Choices. For a small monthly fee, you receive everything I talked about and you help support the show. Plus, every time someone purchases a membership, we gift a membership on your behalf to someone who otherwise could not afford it. All right, now on with today's show.
Today, we're going to continue our conversation on a formula for showing love to a child. And so we are attempting to not really mess up people who are really into the math thing.
Yes.
But
we're going to leave the math.
Point 3, color number 3 in our math formula,
right,
is touch.
Is touch. And how important touch is to a human being.
So you were going to argue that you should probably have like long philosophical discussions with your infant immediately.
Somehow that wouldn't be touch. That would be talk.
Oh, are you implying that that's not the here? I was trying to like back you into a corner and like because you were saying how much experience you had with infants and
yeah, and I actually never said that.
You're just not letting me get that one away.
Yeah, because it was in the warm-ups to where you had said touch communicates to a child because a human being first receives touch as a communication, and you're like, oh well, that makes sense. Infants don't speak, and I'm like, oh, they don't.
Right. See, this was where you were supposed to work with me and just walk right into that.
Right.
But you just like totally messed it up. Okay, so
that's because you were predictable.
Well, I'll have to work on that.
You have known me for at least 2 days. Yeah, like that was really going to work. Okay, all right, okay.
You weren't just going to work with me on that one, were you?
It seemed more fun this way.
So, for those of our listeners who we've thoroughly confused, touch is the first mode of communication with a human being because infants do not have philosophical discussions with anyone.
And you would know this how?
How would I know this? Well, I happen to have one of those in my house. Not the philosophical discussion.
Right. Well, you have those too, I'm sure, but just not with your daughter.
Not with the infant, no.
So, how do you find that, with your daughter, that touch becomes, kind of a viable form of communication?
Well, it's actually kind of funny with her. She is not the most snuggly baby in the world. And so she is only now beginning to kind of initiate some of those things. So she's about a year old and she has just started to like, she'll be playing and then she'll kind of look at you and like crawl over to you and crawl into your lap. Like I'm sitting on the floor or something. But she'll be there for about a total of about 20 seconds and then crawl away. It's like, okay, that's apparently your tolerance for that.
So her personality,
right,
is kind of I got what I needed, and now I'm off to explore again.
Right. Well, and yeah, she's never been a cuddly baby. Like you'll hold her to like rock her to sleep and things. But yeah, it's never just been like just hold me. Right? She's doing more of that. And I think even just this morning she was kind of upset. And she's begun to learn she'll crawl over to you and like raise her hands up, right? Like pick me up. So she'll do a little bit more of that. And there's definitely some, like she was definitely upset this morning. She went to the doctor yesterday. And she did want to be held for a little while. And the time that she is willing to tolerate that's what it feels like is expanding some, but not fast.
So she's got kind of a pockets to which she pulls in, as I would call it, that what she needs from the touch, and per each of our personalities, it's going to be different. Some babies are very, very cuddly and very, very want to be, connected at the hip to somebody, and the point is, touch is one of the first ways we connect as human beings. It's one of the first ways that we communicate to each other. Some children, just, as infants, they might be kind of a little bit upset or kind of crying, and just a parent taking a hold of their hand, or them taking the finger, or grabbing onto their little toes, and then that completely changes that mood and completely changes their emotional responses at that moment. And so that's kind of a part of this, is that never stops, as we go throughout life, and especially for kids. It's just, you have to learn, what is my kid, kind of like what you're talking about with your daughter.
So like you were talking about holding your kid's hand, right? I try to grab my kid's hand and she like almost immediately just pulls away. She's like, nope, my hand, mine.
Exactly. And it's good to know that that's just something about her. She'll open up the avenues to which she'll receive the touch she needs, when she needs it, and how she needs it. And that's the uniqueness of her, the uniqueness of her spirit and her personality. And as parents, we become students of our children, because if they're not going to be held, and they really don't need that, as a general rule, if you try to just change that and force that, you're gonna set yourself up for a lot of problems.
Sure.
Especially when they get older. I've seen middle schoolers, high schoolers, they avoid parents who want to grab them beyond what they want to be filled with hugs and pats and touches. They avoid them like the plague.
Well, and I think that there's a good segue there into one of the things we wanted to talk about, which is appropriate touch, because you had said, you need to do what your child needs. And then you said some parents try to force touch that the child does not want, right? And, there's obviously a place that a child needs to learn, this is touch I do not want, and how to, reject that. Or, I mean, if it's a particularly like scary, bad situation, how to tell somebody what happened, or avoid those situations. Or so touch is both, a powerful, positive communication mode from parents, but then also it has, risk factors, because bad things could happen with touch as well.
Right. And just a little segue. I mean, we're talking about just kids in general.
Yep.
If we were talking about autism.
Oh, yeah, we'd be an entirely different conversation.
Which will be a different podcast we do in the future, because there are a lot of parents who have autistic kids, and the parent really envisioned being able to hug and cuddle and be there for, and the autistic kid is like, don't touch me.
Right.
And with autism and Asperger's, there is studies that have shown that the physical touch actually does generate pain.
Right. It's so discomfortable that it is. Yeah.
And so that's kind of a whole different, stadium. And another different stadium is, kids who have been through abusive situations.
Oh, right. And what their touch is, if they have, God forbid, experienced that.
Right. And now what that looks like to help that part of them regrow and heal. And so just and I just want to put that out there, because, people are going to hear this and they're going to think of these different types of situations. And really this podcast is just covering just the general child, the general human being, and
fundamental basics,
and learning what your child is in that situation. Growing up, I was kind of like your daughter. Not a big touchy-feely person per se, so lots of cuddling and lots of, I wanted to explore the world. I didn't have time for this. I knew what this seat looked like, but, I needed to know what the rest of the world looked like. My brother, he was more the cuddly one. He was more the one, that was, more with my mom and being able to receive those types of pieces from her. And you made a really good point, because from touch in a family, if it's healthy and appropriate, you're learning what touch should look like in a close relationship.
In a healthy, close relationship.
Relationship. You know, they're learning that if a stranger comes up and comes up to them and puts their arm around them, that, whoa, wait a minute, why are you doing that? That's what my mom does. That's what my dad does.
And you're not that person.
Yeah, you're not that person. You know, that's what my brothers do sometimes. But
and then I punch them.
Right, exactly. And then I punch them,
which may be the norm. Yeah.
Oh wait, can I punch you now? You know, and so you're actually helping them to see. You know, we've coined the phrase now, stranger danger, but you're helping them to see what appropriate touch is on the different levels of connection and relationship within society.
When I was just thinking that, like, when you were talking about if a stranger, right? And one of the things that I heard someone say is, you know, we talk about how to keep kids safe around strangers. One of the best phrases I heard was that teach your children to to scream if they are worried about it. These are not my parents. I'm like, that would really freaking get the public's attention if there was a child's like, because like, do kids like, no, I don't want to go, stop, blah, 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 right? And sometimes it's just literally mommy telling them they can't have a cookie, right? But if there's a child that's like, these are not my parents, oh crap,
right?
Hello,
it's gonna get attention,
right? And that's something that, you know, might be useful to communicate to your child along with some of these safety elements.
Right. You know, because sometimes those things, you know, when someone is trying to get someone's child, it's involving touch.
Sure. Right. Well, as you said, like a stranger comes up, puts their arm around them, right? Because they're trying to use that as a manipulative tool. If this is a bad person, right? As we're talking about the safety stuff.
Exactly. I want to circle back around though a little bit because I don't feel like, because this is the third part in the equation that we, you know, had introduced 2 podcasts ago.
Such a bad metaphor because we are so not doing this mathematically. This is definitely more like finger painting because we're saying like, oh, you should do this, but not this. And math so doesn't work that way. So this is the third color in our finger painting.
You know, you're saying that, but this new math they've come out with, it really might work well with that.
Oh, geez, let's not go there.
So what I want to bring up is what does touch do for a human being? You know, and there are lots of studies, even more recent studies that places like Psychology Today have done that shows, you know, how much touch raises the spirits of a person. You know, how much it lifts them up and lowers depression. You know, how much, you know, go back to some of the phrases that we see in movies or TV shows or in our families where somebody comes up and says, you look like you need a hug. And there's a lot of good science behind that. You know, and they really may need a hug because human beings are social and relational beings.
Well, I think I was reading somewhere, and again, you know, I'm not the math guy, but the principle's right. And it was something like you need like 3 hugs a day for survival and like 7 hugs a day to be tolerable and like 20 hugs a day for growth.
I've seen some of those things. I've gone many, many days without hugs in my life at certain periods and didn't die.
You've been okay?
I didn't say that. I said I didn't die. And so I think their numbers, because you know, you mentioned those types of numbers, and now we're getting into mathematics again.
Right. Well, and I gave the caveat. Don't quote me on these numbers.
Well, but see, just going into numbers, because psychology is a science. It's not math. And so
it's a soft science. Is that what you're... As opposed to a hard science?
Well, you know, that's where you could kind of get into a different debate. Sure. But are we going to say that your daughter needs at least 3 hugs a day for the rest of her life to make it and 20 just to be good? I think at some point she may say, that's enough.
Well, and I think you need to take those numbers, and I guess this is kind of how I approach the world, is I look at those numbers and I see a meaning of you need some, and you probably need more than most people think that you do. And I don't get hung up on the numbers.
And that's where I see this as an art.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yes.
And I both agree on that. I mean, I know you, you know me. I know you don't get hung up on the numbers, but there's some people who do. Sure. You know, and so that's why I wanted to kind of spend a little time on that. I think what that study shows is how important touch is.
Right. That's the bottom line.
Exactly. And so then that kind of comes back to the beginning of the podcast as to, what does your son or daughter need? You've got to be a student of them to be able to see what kind of touch they do need, and then to be sensitive to when they're sensing, like you mentioned your daughter had gone to the doctor and then she wanted to be held. So there's an event that occurred that there was emotions that, and needs that she's gaining, security she's gaining out of being held, and it's out of the norm of the general day.
Sure, right.
Yeah. And that's what makes this more of an art than a science. And a lot of studies are showing, that, touch to raising a child communicates. There's physical and emotional connection between the adult and the child, and the child is then drawn to having that touch, feeling that touch, and how those two things help with whatever developmental stage they're in. It's not that adolescents don't want to be touched.
They would say they don't.
Well, and so how much of that is that they say they don't, or how much of that is a response to a culture who's been putting it out in movies and TV shows and literature that they don't?
Well, and that's one thing that I wanted to at least mention is, like, as Americans, we are Americans, for those of us in our audience who may be listening from somewhere else. We have
I'm sure you couldn't tell with our accents.
You're right. We have a culture that is not touchy-feely compared to other countries in the world, other cultures in the world that are. So, yeah, we're definitely saying that this may be a thing. And I think that's what I was getting at with a couple of my examples of, like, you may need to do this more than you think you do because the culture, right? We were talking about teenagers in particular. But just as Americans, we don't do that. And you may need to do that more with your child than you initially feel comfortable with.
I see and hear adolescents say, well, I'm an adolescent now, so I guess I'm supposed to rebel and not want to be, or have anything to do with my parents. But the problem is, I actually like my parents.
Oh, wow. That's a different problem.
Yeah, I actually like spending time with them, but I hear that I'm not supposed to, so I can't.
Wow.
And so that's why it's like, okay, wait. Because I see this all the time when families come in. I even see parents who are like, well, they're teenagers, so I'm not supposed to touch them now. I'm like, well, who said that?
Right. Yeah. Where did you get that from?
Right.
TV, the movies.
Exactly.
Right.
It's like, well, okay,
Time Magazine psychology.
Right. You got this from a Hollywood actor, or you got this from a Hollywood screenwriter. And what is their degree in any of this that they know your kids? Not a lot. They're just there to sell a movie and make money, and so it's like, if you sense something different, challenge it.
Well, and we're telling you that as people who work with, psychology and families, Hollywood should not be your source, and you need to touch your kids.
I think Kevin Bacon said it best years and years ago, where he was asked, what do you have to say to America about longevity of marriage? And he just looked at the camera and said, I'm in Hollywood. Why would you want to hear anything we have to say about longevity of marriage? Have you met us?
Right, because we're terrible at
it. And that's just the thing.
Yeah.
They're not the sources of information, on that type of a thing. And they have their own expertise. They, if I want to know about acting, I'm going to talk to those guys. If I want to know about directing or producing or screenwriting, those are the people I want to talk to because they're so good at it. But when it comes to my kid and when it comes to my marriage, those are not the people I want to seek out, because that's not their field.
Do you want your child to turn out like Hannah Montana?
It's not to put down Hannah Montana,
Sure, I mean, it's an example, right? Absolutely.
It's an example.
I don't know her personally.
Right, and I don't know her story, but what I want is I don't want to take advice on how to raise, my children from Hannah Montana character, because
sure, like, even the Disney portrayed character,
right,
as the writers were writing her.
Right,
yeah.
right, exactly.
True. Yeah, even that.
Yeah, I want to go to people who have some deep-rooted experience, as to when problems happen, what are some good solutions, and how do we work with this?
Well, I think we have probably covered this subject pretty thoroughly. So this is supposed to be the end of our 3-parter here. So we have time and touch and structure, and those are all ways to communicate love to your child. And despite our use as a math formula, it's more like finger painting art, and you should use these tools.
Right.
You've been listening to the Empowering Choices Parenting Podcast. If you have enjoyed this show, we would encourage you to visit our website at empoweringchoices.community. For a small monthly fee, we offer a website full of parenting courses and resources. You also have the ability to connect with parents going through the same struggles you are in a safe and private environment. Every time you purchase a membership to our site, we give away a membership to a parent in financial need. Help yourself become a better parent while helping others gain access to important parenting materials by supporting our podcast. Check us out at empoweringchoices.community or in the App Store by searching Empowering Choices. We'll see you on our next episode.